and saw the film said this is something we should together know about and work toward understanding in greater depth. Michael Kaufman, our speaker today, began a lot of his work when a tragedy occurred in Canada. A young man was upset about the opportunities that were given to a number of women in the engineering field, and he killed 4 women who were engineers. Subsequently, an organization was formed, the White Ribbon Society. It's now well beyond Canada, around the world. In fact, Michael's been speaking along those lines in various countries in the last week. And the society focuses on gender equality, ending violence against women, and ending self-destructive ideals of manhood. For me personally, I see it focused in a character like the film version of Atticus Finch, a hero in my eyes of someone that embodies a lot of wonderful traditional male qualities, but has that kind of inner understanding of being fair to everyone, regardless of their gender, regardless of their religion, regardless of their race. And I think those are important issues for us to talk about. He's here for 2 days, both at MBA and Harpeth Hall, and he's speaking this afternoon. Join me in welcoming Mr. Michael Kaufman.
Hey there. You know, we're living in this time of incredible change, transformation, and usually when you hear someone say, this is a time of change, of upheaval, they're talking about technology, they're talking about war and terrorism. But actually, the most dramatic change in the world, in my generation and yours, is an upheaval in our ideals of what it means to be a man or woman. Changes in what we call gender relations, relations between women and men. And what this change is that ideas about men and women that go back 7,000 to 8,000 years are being overthrown, are being challenged in the course of just 20, 30, 40 years. It's an incredible change, but usually when we hear about this change, people are talking about women, changes in women's lives. Women saying, we want to be treated equally, we want to be paid equally, we want equal opportunities at all levels of society. Women saying they want to have lives free of violence, because as you all know, far too many women in this land, far too many, experience violence in their own homes, experience violence in dating relationships. And so women have come along and say, no, we don't want that anymore. But here's what we don't talk about often enough. We don't talk about men within that equation. We don't talk about our lives as men, young and, well, not so young anymore. And that's what I want to do this morning. I think I have 2 hours. Thank you, good. I just wanted to check on that. That's what I'd like to talk about in these few minutes I have. I want to focus on 2 things. How we currently raise boys to be men and the problems that causes us. Causes not only women, but also men and society as a whole. And then I want to share with you what I think are the 3 secrets of a good relationship. So first of all, how do we raise boys to be men? What are our ideals of manhood that get drummed into us? Remember when my son was born, the first thing the nurse said was, what a strong little fellow. And I knew if it had been a girl, her voice would have gone up and she would have said, oh, what a beautiful little thing. He was a strong little fellow, but he was also the most beautiful little thing that came onto the planet ever, as far as I was concerned. But that's what happens to you and I from the moment of birth. We start sort of setting up a dividing line, and we select out the characteristics that we think are the ones that go with our half of the population and the characteristics that go with the other half. And woe be it to him or her that crosses the line. So we say to boys, you will be able to sort of manipulate machinery and you will be strong and powerful. And of course you'll be able to fight, won't you? You'll be able to fight. And when you fight, you'll just be able to take the pain, not back down. We all say this is what a man is supposedly about. But of course when you're not busy fighting or whatever it is, you're this rugged individual, able to stand alone and die of lung cancer alone, but that's another issue. You know, as real men, we're supposed to lead the way. We're supposed to be in charge. We call the shots. And what about women in this? Well, meanwhile, of course, traditionally, although this is changing rapidly, while we were out doing the important things of running the world, let me just say, listen, guys, hasn't our half of the planet done an incredibly good job running the world? I mean, wow. Politically, you know, economically, climate change, I mean, you name it. We may have not been the best, but anyway, we were out running the world, and meanwhile, what were the women doing? Well, they were supposed to be at home doing, you know, just the housework. And when they weren't at home, they were supposed to be, well, on the sidelines, cheering us on, and of course, in the most sexualized ways you can imagine. So these were our images of women. Of course, these were the things that women have been saying, we're actually more than just, you know, to be there in scanty clothes on the sidelines. But we keep sort of dumping these images of women and men. These are images of women and men. These images that show men dominating women, controlling women. This is, you know, an ad, but it's like a date rape scene, a gang rape scene, isn't it? And these are the images that are dumped on us. And you think it's just an image, it's just an ad. But you and I get bombarded with this stuff from birth. And here's the thing. We've been bombarding boys and men with these images of what a real man is supposed to look like for a long time. But right now, one of the things that we are doing, and this is strange because this is an era of increasing equality. It's an era where ideas of manhood along with womanhood are changing. And yet, in spite of that, one of the things that we are doing as a society is that we are supersizing masculinity. What do I mean by that? Well, we're taking ideas of manhood and pumping it up. So let me show you what's going to look like an observed picture to you. Slightly embarrassing. These were my superheroes back in the 1960s. Now, I know when you see those superheroes, you're going to think, wow, those are flabby middle-aged guys. In fact, you might even look at me and say, Michael, you're looking rather superhero-ish yourself. But the truth was, when I was a kid, in the early 60s, these were my images of invincible masculinity. Now, I know it's hard to believe, but these were my images of manhood that I could never live up to. I could only fantasize about being that strong, that powerful, that super heroic. Well, if I couldn't live up to that, how's a guy supposed to live up to this? If I couldn't live up to this sort of, you know, flabby, sort of goofy sort of look, how could I live up to, a kid now, live up to these ideals of this impossible body? And not just, you know, this impossible body, but look at the difference of expression from these noble, goofy looks to this, I'm going to kill you, you know, sort of look. Or here's another one, supersizing masculinity. Here's the original G.I. Joe action figure, and here's G.I. Joe today. If you can't quite see that at the back, here's a pectoral close-up. Or here's another one I love. Here's the, you know, this new Star Wars movie coming up. Any day now, right? This month? Early next month? Next month, right? I can't wait. Actually, I've got tickets already. Anyway, so this is the original Luke Skywalker action figure, and here's Luke Skywalker now. So, you know, you can see we've just, you know, we've made it, you know, pretty impossible to live up to these images. And of course, then, you know, you sort of, you know, turn on the computer and you know, the games that we play have these images of, you know, just, you know, what are you? Oh, well, you're killing machines. What else, you know, might any man want to be but a killing machine? So these images of manhood are dumped on us from the very start. And the problem is we can't live up to these. None of us can live up to this. None of us will always be strong, powerful, in control. And not only that, the demand that we're always in control. We're powerful. We have all the answers. We don't back down. We stand alone, on and on and on. Not only all that, but we're not supposed to have any feelings, are we? And I just want to, you know, be honest with you as a speaker here. I do want to say, on this thing about men and feelings, I actually did have a feeling once. Ever have one of those? Feeling? No. Good. Okay. Keep it that way. No, you know, we're not supposed to have feelings, unless the feeling is anger. I love it. You know, you're watching, you know, baseball or something, and you know, some guy hits, you know, the home run or the hit that wins the game, and you know, he's just won the game. I mean, he's done something really cool, but he can't just go, "Wow, I won the game. That's so cool." He's got to like just look really serious and, you know, run around the diamond and then, you know, punch someone as he gets into the dugout. You know, it's like throw something maybe. You know, like we can't even show joy. Real men aren't supposed to show too many feelings. But when we do, because we can't live up to this, when we're just a normal human being, when we show things that we say, oh, that's a weakness, you're too soft, what do? Well, we humiliate men and boys. We humiliate men and boys. So the little boy falls down and cries, You all know the story. What do we say to that little boy? Stop crying. Big boys don't cry. Act like a man. Don't be a sissy. So we basically humiliate all of us into being real men. And we teach boys from the start not to trust their feelings. Because not only do we say to that little boy who cries, man up, but we say to him, stop crying, it didn't really hurt. Well, yes it did, that's why he's crying. But we teach us all to distrust our feelings. And this is a problem for all of us men. Just like women have been saying, it's a problem the way we set up society that discriminates against women, says women can't do this, that, or the next thing. And women have stood up against that. It's about time that men stood up against these narrow ideals of masculinity. And it's about time we stood up against them for a couple reasons. One is that the women that we love, that we care about, our girlfriends, our sisters, our mothers, our friends, they've said that these ideals of manhood aren't good for them because they've limited women. They've caused violence against women. But here's the thing. Those ideals of manhood aren't good for us either. There's nothing wrong with saying we want men to be strong. We want men to be leaders. We want all of you to be resilient. Those are great qualities. But the problem kicks in if we say you always have to be strong. You always have to be in control. You can never back down. You can never say, I don't know. You can never say, I could use some help, please. Please just give me a hug. I just need that. That's where the problem kicks in. It's not about strength. It's not about resiliency. It's not about leadership. It's this obsession with always being strong, always being powerful, always being in control. And it's an obsession that we cannot win. It looks like we can win. We all, with these images in our culture of the men who can win that. But in the end, none of us can win it. We can't win it because it's not human. It's not human to always supposedly be strong, powerful, in control, and have no feelings, and not back down, and not ask for help. It's not human. And it just leads us into a trap. It leads us into many traps. And that's why men don't ask for help. That's why men die younger. That's why men are more likely than women to commit suicide. That's why men are more likely to be addicted to alcohol and other drugs than women. That's why men are more likely to be in prison than women. Because we get caught in our own trap. In our own trap, this image, this mask of manhood, this armor that we're supposed to wear, it just does not work for any of us. So what does that tell us about relationships? What does that tell us about relationships and how we can have better relationships? Because here I'm not telling you what not to do, but what we can do to be happier. What can we do to be happier in the context of our relationships? Now, when I talk about relationships, let me just say this from the start. I want to be really clear. This is an open, I'm not here to judge anyone here. This could be, when you're talking about relationships, well, this is sort of a farcical picture, but it could be relationships, boy, girl, man, woman. Could be two women, two men. I'm not here to judge anyone. And of course, we're living in an era of rapidly changing ideals that just basically say, as long as a relationship is consensual, as long as it's based on caring and thoughtfulness and respect, who am I to judge who someone else loves and cares about? I'm also not here to judge what type of relationship in terms of length. You might meet someone that you think, boy, I'm with her or him for the rest of my life. Or you may say, wow, I'm with her for the rest of the evening. Whatever it is, I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to judge you. You're going to make your own decisions based on your moral values, on respect, and so forth. So I'm not here to judge you, but what I want to say is this. When we talk about good relationships, it doesn't matter if it's for 10 minutes or the rest of your life, the same rules apply. So what are these three secrets of a good relationship? Well, first of all, we've got to build our relationships on respect and honesty. Now, people always say that, but what does it actually mean? They say, oh, good communication. What does that actually mean? We usually think that good communication is about what we say. But let me tell you, in the context of a relationship, good communication starts with listening. Starts with listening. Listening to the words that someone says, but also listening to what they don't say. Listening to their body language. So if I say to someone, hey, what do you think of fooling around for a bit? And she might say, yes. But she might say, yeah, I guess so. I've got to listen to her body language, to the way she says it, and not just to the actual word as printed out. So good communication starts with listening. It also is about speaking honestly. Because a relationship unless you just want to, basically be, a stage performer. A relationship is about connecting with someone. It's about creating something new that wasn't there before. And the only way that can happen is by taking some risks. Now, I don't mean taking risks like you go into a first date and you start saying, let me tell you about my childhood, please. It's not like taking risks like that. But it means, as a relationship develops, learning to be honest about who we really are and not hide behind that mask. It's about respect. Respect for the other person's desires. Whether that desire is what movie to see, tonight, or their sexual desires, their sexual preferences. But it's also not just about respect for another person. It's about respect for oneself. When I read stories of guys who've been arrested on charges of rape, it's a horrible story, not just of his lack of respect for someone else, but his lack of respect for himself. Because what he has done is brought shame to his family, shame to his school, shame to his city, shame to all men, I think. So respect is not just for someone else, it's also for ourselves. But the problem is, remember, we're talking about how we raise boys to be men? I'm saying you got to communicate, you got to listen. But we've taught all of us the opposite. We've taught be in charge. This isn't about taking second place, it's about being in charge, being the one who calls the shots. So we can see that some of our ideals of manhood are actually at odds with creating good relationships. Meanwhile, we've trained girls not to be too assertive, although that is changing pretty rapidly. Makes for bad communication. So we've got to work hard. And that leads us to the second thing. Relationships are really hard work. We have this image of what, a relationship, how you get started. And it's all these, these images that are just, out of a fairy tale. And the truth is that relationships take hard work. None of us are intuitive. None of us just know what someone else wants. Half the time we don't even know what we ourselves want. So they take hard work. What sort of hard work? Well, first of all, a good relationship is based on equality. And that takes hard work. Because we live in a society that still isn't based on equality. So relationships take that work. Relationships are about two independent people being together, but not losing their independence. Sometimes you may have heard this expression, someone will refer to my other half or my better half, meaning their spouse. And I just think that's just crap. I mean, that's not your other half. You're an independent, full human being. And what gives us a strong relationship is the capacity of two people to be strong, independent human beings, both of them, but also meet together and create something new. So that means within a relationship, one of the big secrets and the hard work is respecting that independence of each other, learning to be assertive of our own needs and desires, but also not too assertive, so there's also equal space for that other person's needs and desires. It takes hard work. It takes hard work when you get to the point that you're living with someone. Because what we tend to do, particularly if it's a male-female relationship, we fall into these old patterns. Well, this is what a man does, this is what a woman does. And those are just, stuff that humans created, ideas. And those ideas change. They change, and they're still changing. Right now, you and I are living through a major upheaval. For example, what it means to be a father. When you guys become fathers, and the vast majority of you will be fathers someday, either biologically or by adoption, almost all of you, I can guarantee you're going to be fathers in the way that your father, or at least your grandfather, probably wasn't. Because when I talk to men in their 20s and 30s, they say, I don't just want to, quote, help out with the kid. I want to be an equal parent. And of course, in a world where their wife is also working outside the home, they've got to be an equal parent. And so we've got to challenge some of the old roles that limited who we are. When my son and daughter grew up, I wanted them to be independent human beings. So it was important that my son knew how to cook, how to sew, how to iron. It was also important, as well as the traditional stuff that I wanted him to know. And it was important that my daughter knew how to do that, outdoor work, how to, change a washer in a sink and all that stuff. I wanted them to be strong and independent people because I knew that was going to create the best relationships. We can't fall into those old stereotypes because they've limited us. And the third thing, the third secret of good relationships, is that violence and coercion destroy relationships. And when I say violence, I don't just mean physical violence. I don't just mean sexual violence. I mean emotional violence as well. And in fact, the most bruising stuff really is the emotional violence. You know, when I speak to women, or some men who've experienced violence in the context of a relationship, physical violence or sexual violence, they say long after the wound's healed, the emotional impact is what lives on. So we're talking about forms of abuse. We're talking about forms of abuse, and that destroys good relationships. And I want to share with you just 4 things about making sure that sexual violence stays out of any relationships you have in the future or present. And that is the 4 rules of consent. Now, you've probably heard that phrase now. If you're going to have any sort of sexual relationship, you've got to have consent. And when I say sexual relationship, I mean anything you do with your bodies. Kissing someone is a sexual act. Touching someone is a sexual act. Being touched, it's a sexual act. Obviously, having intercourse is. So whatever you're doing that is sexual, that involves parts of your body doing something, parts of their body, that's sex, okay? So that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about sex here. And there's 4 rules of consent that you need to know about. And you need to know about if you forget everything else I say. The first rule of consent is when it comes to sex, only yes means yes. Obviously, no means no. If someone says no, that's no. But we're now these days going beyond that. And we're saying, it can't just be no means no, because sometimes someone is too scared to say no. Someone is feeling intimidated. Someone's not sure. And so we say, no, it needs yes, that affirmative statement. Yes, I want to do that. Yes, I want to make out. Yes, I want to take off our clothes together. On and on. I mean, not right now. Let's be clear here. But that's the first rule of consent. It takes yes to mean yes. The second rule of consent is this. It's your responsibility to know you have consent. Now, some people say, wow, this is a bit of a drag. You mean you got to sort of talk about this sort of stuff? Doesn't that sort of slow down the action? I mean, you know, in the movies, this is what a sexual encounter looks like. You're on a beach. You see someone across the beach. You run in slow motion towards them. You grab each other and you start swinging around, and by the second turnaround, you're totally naked and you're going at it like rabbits, you know, that sort of thing. Now, that's our image of sex in the movies, right? Now, I can tell you, it actually doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Because for one thing, you've got to know you have consent. Can you imagine driving and speeding, and the police officer pulls you over and says you're speeding? Imagine what he or she would say if you said, oh, I didn't know there was a speed limit. It's your responsibility to know you have consent. What's the alternative? Is it a bit of a drag? Does it slow things down? Yeah, it can. It can. It's not always easy. It can be uncomfortable. That's true. But here's the alternative. I don't want any of you ever in this room to ever wake up some morning and think, oh God, was I a date rapist last night? I don't want any of you to ever be in that position. And the only way you won't ever be in that position is to absolutely know you had consent. The third rule of consent. Nothing you've already done gives you permission to do the next thing. So you may be kissing wildly, and you may have consent to do that. But that doesn't give you permission to start sticking your hands down, up her blouse or down her pants or something like that. In a new relationship, in a developing relationship, you've got to get consent for every stage you're going to do. It doesn't mean you always have to do that forever, but in a new and developing relationship, you need that consent. And the fourth rule of consent, if you're drunk out of your mind, you cannot give or get consent. It's just like you get into a car behind the wheel, you haven't even started the car, cop comes over, you've been drinking, cop comes over and says, you're under arrest for driving under the influence. You say, well, I wasn't driving. But that's the law, and the law is like that because we know you cannot make responsible decisions. We know none of us can if we've been drinking, if we're drunk. Same thing with sex. If someone is pouring drink to try to loosen someone up, they're in the process of committing rape. We got to know that. So what do we need to know about this, and how can we make a difference? Well, we as men have got to speak up. We've got to speak out. We've got to say that part of being strong men is to use that strength in ways that don't hurt anyone, that don't hurt women, that don't hurt other men, and also don't hurt ourselves. This is about leadership. Your school is about leadership. And when I think about it, this is something where it's not just like the formal leaders, but how all of us in our own lives can play a leadership role in making a difference. Remember, I heard a story told to me by a guy in 4th year of university. And he told me this. He said, my buddies and I, we always had a tradition. We had a tradition whenever it was one of our birthdays, we all went to the local strip club. And he said, we did this for 4 years. He said, you know what? I really didn't like it. It made me feel uncomfortable. And he said he made a decision. He knew there was one more birthday before he graduated. Sure enough, one night, there was a knock on the door. He opened the door. His buddies were there. They said, John, let's go. And John became a leader. And he didn't make a dramatic speech. He didn't put anyone down. He didn't humiliate anyone. He just said one word. He said, no. And they looked at him and said, what's wrong, John? He's sick? No. Big test tomorrow, exam? No. Then the homophobia came out. John, you haven't switched teams on us, have you? No. Well, why don't you want to go? And he said, I just don't like it. It makes me feel uncomfortable. That's all he said. The next guy over looks at him and says, hey, what do you mean? You don't like going either? Like whenever I go there, like I feel I need to take a shower afterwards or something. The next guy said, hey, wait a minute. You guys don't like whenever I go there, like my girlfriend don't speak to me for like a month afterwards. The next fellow said, wait a minute. You don't like going there? Like, you know, it's against my religion and my beliefs, but, you know, I want to be one of the guys. The next guy said, I was reading an article about trafficking of women into prostitution and sex work, and this is bad stuff that we're part of here. But these 4 guys, none of whom felt comfortable. Another guy said, oh, yeah, I like seeing women without their clothes on, but not when you have to pay for it. Like, that just feels dirty, like you got to take a shower afterwards. None of them felt comfortable doing this, but for 4 years they all did this. Because none of them had the courage to put together 2 letters of the English alphabet and say no. And that's what brings us together today. That's what brings us together. It's about leadership. And I'm going to speak to you as men. You're often referred to as boys, just young men. I'm going to speak to you man to man. You know, in any other era of human history, you'd be men. You wouldn't have any adjective in front of you. You'd be men. So I'm speaking to you men to men. We've got to play a leadership role. We've got to play a leadership role. And you've got to play a leadership role. Because your generation, it's on your shoulders, let's face it. The generations before you, my generation, maybe we started the ball on some of these changes. But we haven't done a particularly good job in the world, let's face it. We have not done a particularly good job in the world. And it's up to your generation to do it better. But I think you can. I think you can. And when I speak to young men across the country and around the world, what I am hearing from you is a determination to do it better than your parents and grandparents. To do it better in the sense of it's not all about men in control and in power. But the best power is the power to share, to meet our needs in the world, to create a world based on fairness, on equality. And so when we think about the lives of our sisters, young men now want for them what we have for ourselves. So we become champions. We become champions of women's rights as men. But also we know that these changes are good for us as men. What it means is that we no longer have to be stuck in these narrow confines that limit who we are and what we can be. Confines that end up being dysfunctional, that tell us we have to endlessly play through pain. And not only does that lead to lifelong injuries, but it screws things up for other people. Look at Peyton Manning on the weekend. Oh yeah, I'm going to play through pain, and he loses the game for his team. This is not healthy behavior. We celebrate it. We celebrate those men, but you know what? All of us can do better. All of us can do better. I believe you can do better. I believe you can do better than my generation. And what I mean by doing better is you and I, by speaking out for equality, by speaking out against violence, by speaking out for the possibility of we men living lives that are full lives, not limited by this narrow box. What you and I are doing is creating a better world for women. That's true. But we're also creating a much better world for men. And someday we're creating a better world for our children and our grandchildren to be. Thanks very much.